Friends, hello. This is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up. This is my little podcast, my show, my video series where I just talk with other writers. No script, no questions written down. We're just talking, and it's fun. I like doing it like that because it's that means I don't have to read their books. I'm joking, of course, but that's partially true because if I had to read the recent novel or recent release for every person that I'm talking to, I just wouldn't get it done because I am a slow reader. But I just want to have that organic conversation. I want to just pretend I just met this person at a cocktail party and now I want to know everything about them. So it's fun for me. Before we get to today's guest, just a reminder, my new book, Tell Me What You Did, is out to great acclaim, thankfully, thank God. And so you can pick that up wherever you want. And I've just been hearing more and more great things about the audiobook version. I have not listened to it. I've listened to kind of that sample minute. I have talked to the audiobook narrators on this very show. But I was just at the Hamptons Whodunit conference, and it's kind of a fan conference, and a lot of readers came up to me and said, "Oh my God, the audiobook version is crazy good." Patrick and Allison, the narrators, did an amazing job with that. I'm also going to mention my company, Unbound Writer, through which I do an offering of online classes. I do seminars and retreats, and we are still in development on some online classes. There's some online classes that are already out. They're just self-guided online classes that you can take, including one by me about how I write thrillers. So you might want to check that out. But all that stuff you can find at unboundwriter.com. And I also do free consultation calls. So if you're thinking about getting a writing coach, there's a link on that website where you can just sign up for a free 20-minute chat with me just to see for a good fit, and I can answer any of your questions. All right. That is the paid advertising for this portion of the show. Moving on, I want to talk to you about my guest today. So today I talked to the wonderful Cynthia Pelayo. So Cynthia is a Bram Stoker Award-winning and International Latino Book Award-winning author and poet. So a Bram Stoker Award, that's a pretty big deal. That's the Horror Writers Association, kind of their annual award. So it's like winning an Edgar. It's a big deal, and that's a fantastic credential to have. So Cynthia and I, I didn't know much about her, obviously, going into this episode. We had a fantastic talk, and we actually learned a lot that we have in common, mostly having spent, decades in kind of a corporate job and now kind of writing full time and making that transition. And then just also kind of hiding our writing early on from the people at work because we didn't know if that was a stigma or what the results of kind of telling everyone that you write dark fiction is going to be. And Cynthia does write dark fiction. You could even say, a lot of her stuff is kind of fairy tale adjacent, which, fairy tales are dark anyway, but kind of having a story that's kind of has some kind of relationship to a fairy tale and, a very dark book. And I will mention that her latest book, which looks amazing, is Vanishing Daughters. That was out this year with Thomas and Mercer. So we had a really good discussion, a lot of shop talk in this one. So if you're an aspiring writer, I think you're going to find a lot in here that's helpful, including all of our hopes and fears we talked about at length. And then at the end, we made up a great little dark story involving a pig. That is it. You're going to like this one, friends. This is my conversation with Cynthia Pelayo. But so where are you? I know you've spent a lot of time in Chicago. Do you live in Chicago or in the area?
Yeah, I'm right in the city. So
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, you're right in the heart of it. Yeah, my publisher's over in Naperville, but I haven't been out there in
Oh,
years and
source
years
books.
and years. Source books, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
We had,
um,
we had an office in the city, but I think they've moved. They're all in Naperville now. Yeah.
yeah, I think I'm guessing, but I think during the pandemic, everyone just kind of started doing the whole remote thing. Are you from Illinois originally?
I was born in Puerto Rico, so I'm
Oh,
from
okay.
Puerto Rico. That's where ancestry's from. And
Yeah.
then my dad came here in the 50s, kind of bounced around, settled in Chicago, and we've been here since.
Okay. Yeah. It's probably changed a fair amount, I imagine, during that time.
Oh, even since the 80s, it's
Yeah.
changed significantly. Um, but I think I like it because it's not like New York, wherein everything's just like concrete. In Chicago, there's pockets of neighborhoods that feel like a little suburb. Like I have a huge backyard and a side lot, and I had like 5 trees on my property at one point.
That's
But
great.
and so it's a city, and you can kind of find the light right the right little pocket. You can feel like you're not so closed in by city stuff.
Yeah. And it's interesting talking to you and kind of researching you and for all the guests that I have on, we all have varying degrees of education within, English lit or writing or MFAs. One end of the spectrum is me, who, has a business degree and never studied writing, never thought about writing, and then all of a sudden I'm just writing. And then it seems on the other end of the spectrum, we have someone like you who's really studied in not only the art of writing, but literature. And so is that from an early age, you just had that kind of love?
Well, I wanted to study literature like in my undergrad and do that right away. And you tell an immigrant parent, hey, I'm gonna do art in college, and my dad's like, no, you're not. You're gonna do something that's you're gonna do journalism. We settled on journalism. And so I did journalism. I saw the great fold of newspapers left and right. And so I did business. So I got my master's of science in marketing. And so I worked in corporate consulting for 2 decades. But
Oh, interesting.
on the side, I was always, I was working on my MFA. I was studying literature. Nobody at my day job knew what I was doing. They didn't know I was writing.
Right.
And I'm convinced, one of the reasons I was let go and I got a mass layoff is because it gets to a point where you just can't hide it anymore. And
Right. It's so funny. I mean, I'm the same way. I was decades and decades in the hospitality consulting, real estate consulting. And you're right. And it's this, you hide it because first of all, you're worried that like, hey, their focus is elsewhere, but you also hide it because you're almost kind of ashamed of it. Like, you don't want
yeah,
them to say that, oh, let me see what you've written. No, I don't want to do that.
like my clients were like Visa and National Geographic and Exxon Mobil, and so I'm going down to Houston in like my, suit, my corporate consultant suit. And in the background, I'm like thinking about like these little like scary stories. And it's just like, I don't think like the head of marketing and communications at ExxonMobil would like to know that I'm like a mystery thriller horror writer. I don't know. There's a stigma,
Yeah.
and
There,
there's a
yeah.
stigma.
But you said when you were laid off, mass layoffs, that you think perhaps the writing was at least
I
adjacent to that.
I got laid off. I won the Bram Stoker Award on Saturday. I got laid off on Tuesday.
Oh my goodness. Now, were you part of, but it was other people were being laid off as well, though,
Other people
obviously.
were being laid off throughout that period of time,
Right.
but I thought it was very strange
Yeah.
timing. And so, when you win an award like that, you get pumped into the media. They publish the lists and stuff. And so I think I don't think it was seen as an okay thing. Nothing was ever written or documented. I got my layoff money, and I got to think and figure out what I'm going to do. But I feel I have an intuitive feeling that says
Sure.
writer is
Sure.
why.
And it certainly could be. I mean, I think every company's different. And I felt the same way. And I think one of my early jobs when, I probably wrote for years and years, um, pre-publishing, that I didn't let anybody know. but and then there's the concern. They think like, oh, are you writing at work? Are you, that kind of a thing, which, you're like, how could I write at work? This is not a place that's conducive to creative writing.
Yeah, I'm like, how could I write even? Because I was working. I mean, I had a great job. I was working remote, and I was traveling, and I was like, how could I work right when I was working? I was always like on Zoom calls like all day long. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, influencers get laid off from their day, just regular influencers who are influencer about like books or who knows what. I think I think corporations deep down inside don't like people having a life outside of the corporation.
Yeah, and there's also something about, especially now, maybe not so much 10 or 20 years ago, but especially now with obviously with TikTok and Instagram, and you're sharing stuff, and you write dark fiction. I write dark fiction.
Yeah.
So you might be posting stuff that's not, slamming the company, but it's not a corporate imagey kind of a thing. And certainly once they start reading the books, you're like, holy shit, this person's messed up.
Right. No, and I think, I think it was probably a part of a lot of stuff because I had been writing and publishing since like 1999 in like journalism. But then it was like really during the pandemic that I knew I needed to get attention. I was like, I feel like dark fiction is about to blow up. And if I don't get on this train, I am screwed because COVID's going to change a lot of things. So I admittedly became like a character almost online. And so I
Hmm.
was really on Twitter, really goofy, really over the top. And I would post, I think, all day long. So I was posting, probably while I was at work. So that's probably one of the reasons too. So I was on social media a lot and I really built up a social media persona. And it was with that that I got the attention of publishers. And then I started finally getting more and more deals into the traditional deals. So I hate to admit it, but it was kind of like I feel like I had to sacrifice some of my life in order to get the attention. I've scaled back on social media. Like I just post kind of like updates. But before I was just like
Yeah.
plugged in.
But I mean, that's what they say you're supposed to do. I mean, that's an existential question that I do coaching as well, and a lot of clients just are asking about how much time do you spend on social media? What are the best practices? And it's a moving target, and I'm probably not the best person to ask this to, but I'm pretty active. But after a while, there's only so much I can say that before I'm sick of myself.
Yeah, I I agree. And I feel like with the way things get throttled on social media, you can post like this really great graphic or this really great update, and your entire audience isn't even going to see it.
Right.
And so I think I think at least right now, you need to be really have a hybrid approach with having in-person events
Yeah.
and a little bit of social media. And of course, just focusing on the writing a good book.
Right. And I noticed on your website you're on Substack as well. And that's something that I focus on is I'm not on Substack, but I send out
Newsletters.
religiously a monthly newsletter. And I really spend a lot of time curating content, writing personal essays, stuff that's only going to my newsletter subscribers. And I feel like that's a way to really connect. But then you're like, well, how do I build this base? How do I? So it's always like trying to get more and more and more people, and it's frustrating, but it's also it's kind of like you just keep chipping away at it, and things will happen. But it's hard to do everything,
Everything is so fragmented right now.
right? It
It's
is.
so fragmented. It's like, okay, I'm only going to get a few people here on Substack and then maybe a few people here on Instagram. And then
Yeah.
it's a lot.
Right.
And this is part of writing that I had no clue that was part of, maybe like in the 90s, this wasn't part of being an author. But today it's like, this is a lot.
Right. In the 90s, it wasn't fragmented, and it was easier through a PR and marketing and just a traditional publisher campaign to garner attention. And now like to your point, it is so fragmented and it is all kind of up to you. So I always hire a PR firm outside of what Sourcebooks does. And what Sourcebooks does is amazing, really top notch. I still hire a PR firm to work with them because I'm just like, just let me give this book the best shot possible. Because ultimately, I found it is kind of word of mouth is what sells books, but you have to be able to get it into hands into those early influencers to start spreading the word.
And I agree. I think hiring additional help or getting additional help is it's you're going to see the benefit because we can only be so many places. We can only post so many times, and
Right.
our publishers can only do so much. It's an investment, but I feel like it's an investment with a return that you see.
Yeah, and even though it's the return that's impossible to measure, but you have
Yeah.
to just believe it's there. I mean, everything we do. So you mentioned at the top of this conversation, in-person events, being on tour, that kind of a thing. And I think the layperson sees that as like, oh, your publisher is sending you around the world, and that's couldn't be further from the truth, right? The
Yeah, we
truth
pay for
is, for me at least, the truth is, hey, there's like 10 to 15 opportunities for in-person events. My publisher will pay for some of them. Some of the events will pay me to go, but not for everything. Some are just totally out of my pocket if I want. So you have to make this decision. And, there's a lot of events that are a net expense to you, the author. And so you've got to make that decision. Hey, one day
Mhm.
at this book festival, is it enough exposure, you know, to
Oh
pay
yeah.
off? Or is my ego talking and now all of a sudden I'm out $1,000 because I just thought it would be cool to, yeah, it's so hard to figure out.
Yeah, no, same thing. I feel like a lot of it is okay. Some opportunities will pay they'll pay you flight, hotel, maybe transportation. If you're really lucky, if you get that and a stipend, that would be lovely. Some very few places do that. Some places might only cover your flight. One place only did my ground transportation while I was there.
Right.
Other places I'm paying. I had to determine whether okay, is this opportunity worth me paying out of pocket? There's two events that I'm just paying fully out of pocket just because the event organizers are this is like one of their first or second time doing these things. I really like the event organizers. They've been so supportive of me and my work. One's like a bookseller and it's at the bookstore. And I was like, they're always like supporting me. So I will pay out of
Yeah.
pocket for that. But there's always going to be an expense. Like there's always going to be an expense. So
Right,
I
right. And you can write it off, of course, but that's not the same as somebody else paying for it entirely. And the other thing I've learned over the years is that if you are going to go do those things, throw yourself totally into them. Like don't go and be a wallflower, learn how to moderate panels, like really learn how to speak publicly, learn how to command the attention of a room, and then people are going to start noticing you and they're like, oh hey, can you be in conversation with this person? And then all of a sudden you're doing more and more events that maybe don't cost so much money and you're being seen more, and because that starts to pay off over time.
and I think these events have helped, maybe not necessarily push book figures, but they've at least helped me with other opportunities, with getting placed at other events.
Totally.
Um, I also, so I'm not in corporate consulting anymore. I'm teaching, so I teach like at different writing programs. So I've gotten those types of opportunities, um, which is great because that's basically how I'm making my living right now is writing and teaching.
That's great. Yeah, and it's a same. It's funny. I had a corporate gig that I was laid off from a couple years ago, a little bit more than 2 years ago. I ran this consulting division, and then this big multinational came in and bought our company, and then got rid of all consulting because they just don't want consulting. Similar story. Good severance, this and that, and then I'm like, I'm just going to write, and I started a writing company as well that does coaching and retreats and stuff. And then I started another business hospitality consulting with somebody, a partner of mine who got laid off as well. So you're trying to figure all this stuff out, and you're trying to figure out, like on the writing side, like how do, I think people are going to be interested. How do I reach them? How do I, Facebook ads and all these kinds of posting in different writing newsletters and ads and other places. And it's a lot of money, and it's just trying to get people on board, and it's tough.
It's definitely a different way of life. I worked at that company nearly 2 decades. I was there for a long time.
Yeah.
And now it's like, I was talking to another author. I was just at the San Antonio Book Fest, and one author just kind of saw that I was like dazed, and they were like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "I don't have a job." Like it just really dawned on me. I'm
It
like, "I
just
don't."
hit you in that moment.
And they were like, "This is your job," and I was like, "Yeah, but you know what I mean." And they were like, Cynthia, this is the life. You just have to cobble enough opportunities to make a living. And I was like, "That's terrifying," but
It is.
it's
Yeah.
terrifying. So
Because it's not, there's no linear
no.
progression. And so not only is it terrifying on that side of the equation, but it's also you've kind of spent your whole life kind of hiding your writing a little bit and not, and I'm totally speaking from my own perspective now, but not giving it the weight that it deserves because you're like, well, it's not how I'm paying the bills. I'm paying the bills with this corporate job. So all of a sudden, when it's all that you have to really treat it as the career that it is because it is a career. And
Yes.
it's a weird shift.
Yeah, and I think, in being able to, or using social media to kind of become a character and get all that attention. Once I had all that attention and then I started selling to traditional publishers, then I was like, okay, now that persona is done, because now this is a career and I have to start treating my social media a little bit differently. I have to start, just behave, because this is my career and this is how I pay my bills. I have 2 children. Um, and so that all was a shock. Moving that, like, mindset of my day job, the way I would protect it, that's now gone. This is my day job,
Right.
writing. So it's
Right.
very different. Yeah.
Yeah, what do you mean I have to go out and buy health insurance now?
Like, oh, I have to set aside money from, like, I'm like, just earlier, because my husband's working remote today, and I'm in Excel and I'm creating a spreadsheet, just, calculating how much I'm going to set aside for taxes from each opportunity. And he's like, "You're doing a good job." He was just like, "That's what you have to do. You have to start, calculating how much you're going to set aside for taxes for next year. Because we have to pay these, our taxes are a little different when you're a freelancer."
Totally. And when you're talking about books, it's, you're not sure exactly when the advance is going to come. If the advance comes, royalty statements are every 6 months. So it's not like you have this steady stream where you can easily predict. You might get a royalty check in the thousands of dollars. You might get a royalty check for less than $5. Like it can be all over the board. I've experienced both.
Yeah. So it's shocking. It's a different way of life. I think right now I was reluctant to accept it. I
Yeah.
think that I think I was still in the mindset, like, no, I'm gonna go back to the corporate world and I'll find another. I mean, I was a vice president when I was let go.
Yeah.
And so nobody is going to hire me at a consulting firm at that level, very well knowing they can Google me and be like, "Oh, Cynthia Pelayo, dark fiction author." Like, no one,
Yeah.
it's not gonna happen anymore. So I have to accept that I had to come to terms that life is over. This is it. What do I do to pay my bills?
Yeah. Did you ever think any time in your career about having a pen name or just always your name?
I know, and I should have.
No, I'm the same. I mean, the only time I ever kind of thought about it was early on after my first three books didn't sell. And then, my first three did okay, but not great. And you start thinking about, do I rebrand? Do I, because everyone loves the shiny debut.
Yeah,
But I never did because I like my name.
I didn't even think of anything. I didn't think anything about it, and now it's like, oh, I guess I could have just used a pen name, but I
Yeah,
mean, at this point,
it's too late for that at this point.
this is it. Just teaching and writing, and I'll see what else I
Right.
could pull together.
And it's along these same lines, it totally depends on what you write too, because I find, once I started kind of telling people that I was writing, I was actually surprised about how many people kind of embraced it and kind of just liked it and just kind of thought, even within my workplace, that, oh, this is a great thing. Then they might read a book or two that, I like, again, like you, I write pretty dark stuff, mainstream, but dark. And then people are like, oh, what happened to you as a child? And Now you write speculative fiction, and maybe just define that for the listeners in case they're not super familiar with that term.
So speculative fiction are like you can consider it as something that would occur in the real world that would incorporate like the paranormal. So,
Right.
you would think it's like a perfect example would be like, well, Gone Girl. Everything takes place in reality. But let's just say maybe the husband was a ghost. Well,
Right.
that's speculative. So
Right.
anything that is that incorporates something that might be supernatural or paranormal, I there are different variations of
Right.
speculative
Because
fiction.
there's magical realism and there's, yeah.
And things can go like way over the top and way violent. I feel like my works are a little bit more quiet,
Yeah.
where I mean, Time Traveler's Wife is another example where it's the guy just time travels, and that's
Right.
usually
Right.
you
There's
just
no ways around it. Yeah.
you just accept that in the reality of the book. And so, um, The Shining Girls, that's a perfect example of a detective mystery fiction that where it's a time traveling serial killer.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting feedback you get when you're trying to sell something. My agent would call that woo woo, for example. She'd be like, I don't want the woo woo shit. But like I might have, yeah, as a psychological thriller writer, there could very well be ghosts, but because you're in this first person present tense narrative, it's also easy to say this person's imagining this because they're losing their grip on reality so you can get away without it actually being supernatural, but in other cases obviously like time traveling you're like no,
Right.
this is what's happening in the story, and you have to embrace that.
Yeah, I like narratives where it's like, is that really happening in reality or is that all in the character's head? So I
Yeah.
do like that, where you finish the book and then you're just like, did that just happen or was she just crazy?
Right, because you could be an unreliable narrator.
And so most of my books, I feel like most of my books, if you wanted to finish them that way, you can probably walk away with, was that just her crazy?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's what a lot of more of my recent novels, a lot of my recent novels are, I think, are along those lines because I'm trying to move more into the quiet, speculative, and more over the. I don't really go for the over the top like monsters and creatures in my books. Like I'm just kind of like I don't
Right,
care.
right. You almost want somebody to kind of feel like using a ghost as a perfect example. I think a lot of people, including myself, have had what I can only describe as actual paranormal experiences that I can't explain, that's beyond a dream or whatever. And so I think when you kind of are like, to your point, quiet around it and kind of suggest things, people can relate to that. If people want a monster story, people are going to go out and buy a monster story and they can find that no problem. But if people want kind of that internal paranoia, um,
Yeah.
something quieter is can be very delicious, I think.
And I think ultimately, like the scariest books are going to be those that are realistic, where it's just like this is a killer and this is a serial killer. Like I always feel like those are verifying. For me, it's always just been easier to kind of weave in the supernatural as an
Yeah.
explanation of why this person is a killer. But yeah, I mean, like Silent. That's why Silence of the Lambs is still like this iconic novel because of how
100%.
yeah, how
Right.
haunting he is.
Right. And it's very difficult to write because it's been done a lot. So if you start thinking, like, even if you throw out the term serial killer now, it's very easy to be like, okay, there's a million serial killer books. That doesn't mean you can't have, you know, something like Silence of the Lambs or like a movie like Seven, where you're like, all right, this is next level, different, creepy, and effective. But it's hard to find that space. And I know you kind of gravitate towards almost fairy, like kind of restructuring fairy tales in a way, which are
Yeah,
creepy, creepy stories in their own right.
they're very creepy and they're very strange, and I feel like many of them are still applicable warnings.
Yeah.
Like with Forgotten Sisters, when I was writing that, I kept thinking of the movie The Others with Nicole
Oh,
Kidman,
which is such
which
an understated movie.
is so good. It's
It's
just like
so
I'm
good.
surprised. It's just so. So it's kind of like oh gosh, not what was the other one? The one with Bruce Willis, where he's dead at the end.
Oh yeah, Sixth Sense.
The Sixth Sense. So I was thinking about the others, and I was thinking about the Sixth Sense, and I kind of wanted to do my take on that, and that's where Forgotten Sisters came in, where I wanted to write the story where you're just like, wait, is one of these people dead? And then you get
Right.
to the end, you're just like, one of these people was dead the entire time. So,
Right. And
um,
is it believable? Is it effective? Is it, or are you just trying to pull the rug out
oh,
clumsily? And
oh,
it's a hard balance to do.
it is because a lot of people come to my books because some people actually like the history that I kind of pour in there. Some people like the poetry that I put in there. Some people like the supernatural. Some people don't like the supernatural stuff at all. So
Yeah.
some people will literally say, I read Cynthia's novels because I kind of like these elements, but when she gets supernatural, I don't care.
Yeah.
Because a lot of mystery writers don't want the supernatural in their books.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny. I'm kind of that as a reader as well. Like Stephen King's a great example. I'll pretty much read almost anything he puts out, but I love the stuff that's just grounded in reality, which isn't many of them. But you know, because he's such a great writer, but if it's really hardcore paranormal, I'll still enjoy it, but it's not my bag as much.
Yeah, it's hard for me to like I think that's why I like things that are much more quiet because if it's just way too paranormal for me to I'm just kind of like okay, right now I'm working on a few one of the things I'm working on is I'm working on my first thing that's grounded in reality, which is uh we'll see how that turns out, but I've been wanting to write something that's just kind of grounded in reality, just like this really sad, almost like a fairy tale, but it's not. There's nothing supernatural that happens in it
Right,
at all.
right. Is any of that based on, do you get feedback from like your editors saying like, oh, we would love to see you go in this direction? Or is it just like you turn something in and you see if they want it or not?
So the one that I'm working on a few things. One thing I'm working on, it's very like out there. It's a continuation of Peter Pan set in 1914 in London.
Hmm.
So that's not realism at all, but it sort of is. So because I am incorporating elements of World War One into it because World
Right,
War One takes place. It doesn't take place at all in Neverland. I don't think it's just like
right.
all in.
I
So
mean, that's
that's
very much like the, you know, the Wonder Woman story, how they incorporated elements of World War One, and so and when I saw that, I'm like, this is amazing. I love that.
so that's what trying to weave that because that's due. So that's been announced. So that's why I guess I can mention that one. That one's been announced. Um, but at least my editor at Thomas and Mercer, she loves the fairy tale stuff, and she's always like, "Go for the fairy tales, do more of the fairy tale stuff." So the realistic novel that I'm working on, this is kind of in the background, a story that I've been wanting to tell for a while.
Okay. And how long does it typically take you to? I mean, 'cause I can't conceive of working on multiple things at once. I am singularly focused. So if I get my editorial notes back on something, I drop the novel I'm working on, and for the next month, that's what I'm working. I can't multitask. So how long does it typically take you to write, like, say, a full novel?
Well, I am a chaos person. um, I so I write I have ADHD, so that's public. But and so I think because of that, I need to be working on different things and breaking up different things at different times. So I'm always working on a lot of different things. And to write a first draft of a novel, which is ugly and horrendous,
Hmm.
would probably take like 3 months.
Oh,
That's like
geez, that's fast.
that's like
Even ugly and
no
horrendous, that's fast.
no one looks at that. So that is it looks more like a screenplay. It's where
Okay.
like stage directions and so it's not really fully fleshed out. So it's about 3 months that will take me. And then from there I'll rewrite it and then just keep layering it and layering it.
Okay. And
Getting it
that's kind of where where the magic happens, is in that, you
and
know,
stuff.
it depends on the novel I'm working on, but I'm not outlining. So sometimes I'm looking back as I'm writing it, but a lot of times I'm just plowing through, and I might look back once just to literally remember, because I don't remember what I wrote. So I'll forget whole plot elements. So I have to go back. Other times I'm like, if it's not feeling, if it's I'm like that my character is not totally right, I need to go back and start working on it. So I'm like 6 to 12 months to have something that I can turn into 8 to 12 months, probably something I can turn into my agent.
Do you outline?
No, not at all. That's a problem. I mean, maybe it's not a problem. It's just how my brain works. I can't, I'm literally incapable of it. I need to be physically writing for the story to kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
unfold. And that's to me that's where I find the joy in the writing is that discovery process. And I've tried outlining and I just sit there and I'll think of when I outline, I only think of the most obvious plot elements. I don't think of the cool stuff that naturally unfolds as I write. So then I start writing from an outline, and then within pages, I'm like going off script.
Yeah. But 8 to 12 months is fast. So for like a novel that's ready to be looked at. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my goal is a book a year to be published, and I have like 10 books over 14 years, and so so there's been gaps where something's taken longer and you don't control the publication schedule, so they might want it to publish it in 18 months after you've written it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I am trying to do the one a year. So I think that's my goal, just to kind of do one a year and like just smaller projects here and there. I do essays and I do short stories and anthologies and nonfiction things. And so we'll see.
right. Yeah,
Everything's
and
like,
I think that's something either aspiring writers or kind of readers maybe don't appreciate as much is all the writing that you do that's beyond the work that's being published. A good example is as you're launching a book, your team might say, hey, Writer's Digest has asked for an essay. Criminal Reads wants an essay. So you're writing all these essays, or you're writing your newsletter, which is very, you're putting a lot of thought into it. And maybe you're able to kind of reuse different things. And I try to do that as much as I can because it's exhausting and it has to be good. It can't just be like what a consultant might do is like, okay, I know what I can write that's going to be good enough and no one's going to read this anyway. Like, no, this is a really personal take on an issue that I'm passionate about. This is going to take me a while, even though it's only 750 words.
I'm convinced, well, not convinced, I work harder now than when I worked in
100%. No question.
right?
Yeah. I think about that all the time. I tell people all the time, I work harder than I ever have, and I'm making less money than I ever have.
Exactly.
But I'm truly happier than I have been because you are Cynthia, you are working on something that is your vision. You're not doing something that's somebody else's or the client's vision. It's all you. And there is something very fulfilling about that, even though it's also very scary at times.
Yeah, no, it's 100% working the hardest I've ever worked for the less money, but it's mine. And I think if you once I started looking at this as this is my small business, how am I going to tailor my life? But you're working all day long. And like you said, you have a book out and then your publicist will contact you like, hey, also add this to your schedule and this essay. And so it adds up. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. One thing I noticed it just is very incidental, but like I wear a Fitbit so I can track my steps and that kind of a thing. Yeah, when I was working remotely, like working from home, corporate job, I was moving around a lot because I'd be at home. I'd be like, oh, I'm going to do this because a lot of my work was just keeping on top of things rather than actually I'm producing the work. I'm overseeing a team. So I might be working on a house project while I'm doing this or taking the dog out or whatever it is. I have fewer and fewer steps these days as I'm self-employed because I am sitting. So I have to like remind me, go walk, go get fresh air because you just can't be in the front of the computer all the time.
Yeah, it's. I was on the computer like at 11 o'clock at night. And my husband's like, when are you going to bed? I was like, I just have another thing to do.
Right.
It's always something else to do. Like, and it's so much that I think you have to really want this.
You have to. Why would you do it otherwise?
I wouldn't. if when someone asks me for advice to become a writer, that's like what I tell them. Like, do you really want to do this? Like,
Right.
you have to love writing, and then you also have to understand there's a business aspect
Right.
that I had no clue what the business aspect looked like until I was just in it. And so at this point, it's like, why I love writing so much, you just have to make the business aspect work. And you're just like doing tons of admin emails all day long too.
Right.
You know, it's a lot of, you're always doing something. And so you
Yeah,
have to do this.
totally. And my work, my writing, my novel writing is 1 hour of my day. That's all I do. And it's all the other stuff that's consuming my days, and the marketing and trying to get the word out, and just for the different companies. So it's exhausting, but you're right, you have to love it. And I realized that, so I work with students, like one-on-one coaching students, and that's my very first question to them is like, why do you write? And don't give me a bullshit answer, really think about it. And because I do think there are people who like the idea of being a writer, and that won't last long. That'll be good for a few years, but
the romantic image of the author,
or the people who have written the book and then they just won't let it go. It's been 10 years in the making and it's not getting published, and they won't. It's this burning ember of hate inside them because they can't get, like me. I was getting my books rejected left and right. I'm like, okay, I guess that's one way not to do it, so let me try something else, because I enjoy the process of crafting the story. And you learn from that over time and you get better, and then eventually good things start to happen. But if you're just holding on to something, it just never ends well.
Oh yeah, definitely changing things up. That's why I got picked up by traditional presses, because we all have books that we've written that will probably never see the light of day.
Totally.
My earlier novels, nobody wanted them, and I can see why. And so I just kept adjusting things. And even now, I've done for what Forgotten Sisters is and what Vanishing Daughters, what those two are. Those are probably going to be very different books than what I'm going to be working on next, because those are very like philosophical and watery and dreamlike. And now it's time to do the next thing. And if you're not always changing it up, you're not improving.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think that's a great way to end this conversation. But before we hang up, we're going to do a quick little storytelling on our own, if you're up for it.
Yeah, for sure.
This is the making it up portion of the show. I have 3 books that I've pretty much randomly, they were all on one bookshelf over here, so I just grabbed them. I'm going to have you choose one of those books. We're going to choose a random sentence from a random page. I'm going to read that sentence, and then that'll be the first sentence in maybe like a 2-minute long short story. So I'm going to read a sentence. You give me off the top of your head maybe the next 1 or 2 sentences. I'll do a couple sentences, and then it'll inevitably go off the rails, and then we'll stop.
Okay, cool. Let's go.
I've got Mindy Mejia's A World of Hurt, Allison Brennan's The Missing Witness, and this one isn't out yet, but Matthew Sullivan's Midnight in Soap Lake. So
we're going to go with Mindy.
Mindy's great. I met her. I went to a friend's launch party, Josh Moling, in Minnesota, and Mindy was there. And I had just read this, and I'm like, I loved it because it was so dark. And I don't know, I don't feel like I read a lot of really good dark stuff. And so I'm just like, you're messed up, and I love it.
Mindy's great. Yeah.
Give me a page between 1 and 336.
167.
Okay, I'm going to look on page 167 and find. All right, so I'm just going to read this, and you do whatever you want with this. Is a very random sentence.
Okay.
Involving a pig. I turned to the pig, who was nosing my pants through the fence, probably hunting for something better than lint and sunflower seeds.
And so I dug into my jacket pocket and pulled out a pineapple and handed it to the pig.
I'd never touched a pig before, and I was fearful at first, but I let him, and I think it's a him, nibble the pineapple out of my hand. And at that moment, I noticed the blood on its whiskers.
And so I dropped the fruit and screamed and ran to the pig pen, where I found what I was hoping never to find.
I smelled it before I saw it, and it was hard to imagine that something could smell so bad even in a pig pen. And I looked over in the corner in the mud, and I saw 3 separate arms sticking up, all with their fingers extended.
And so I scolded the pig and I said, please, this is now my 3rd husband that you have killed.
I think we call it there. That's great. What was the Thomas Harris, and listeners are going to be screaming right now because I don't remember, but the one where they fed the bodies to the pigs. I don't know if that was Hannibal, but that's immediately when I started. I see the word pig and I'm like, oh, pigs are going to eat a corpse.
Yeah, they eat everything. Yeah.
Well, Cynthia, what a pleasure not only to meet you, but to have a good conversation talking about our struggles trying to write full time, but our joy in our struggles doing it.
Yeah, this was a good conversation. I needed it to remind me why we do it.
Awesome. Well, I hope to meet you in person someday, and best of luck with all your writing. All right, that is my conversation with Cynthia Pelayo. I hope you enjoyed the little short story about the pig. I know I did. Her latest book is Vanishing Daughters. If you want to check it out or read anything you want to read about Cynthia, just go to her website, Cynthia Pelayo, Pelayo.com. And head on over to carterwilson.com if you want to check out my books, my podcast, my newsletter, all that kind of stuff, or events that I'm going to be at. And you can head on over to unboundwriter.com if you're interested in any of the writing coaching services that I provide. That is it. That's all I got to say. I've got nothing else. I'm going to go have lunch now. Thanks as always for watching and or listening. Another episode, of course, will be out next week. In the meantime, take care.